All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on every single digital image you've ever seen. We're going to demystify the two secret worlds that all graphics live in. One is a world of pixels, and the other, a world of paths.
Yep, you heard that right. Whether it's a photo you snapped on your phone or that sleek company logo you see everywhere, it belongs to one of these two worlds. And honestly, getting the difference between them, that's the secret to making your own visuals look amazing.
I mean, we've all been there, right? You grab a logo off a website, try to blow it up for a presentation or a poster, and suddenly it looks like a blurry, blocky mess. So what gives? Why do some images fall apart like that while others stay perfectly sharp?
Well, the answer is all about which of those two secret worlds that image comes from. See, that blurriness is what happens when you try to stretch an image beyond its limits, literally stretching its fundamental building blocks to the breaking point.
Okay, so let's meet the two main players in this story. In one corner, you've got a world built entirely from tiny, tiny squares of color. And in the other corner, a world built from pure, elegant mathematics. This is it, the big showdown, pixels versus paths. And you can see the difference right away, just by looking at them. On the left, you've got a beautiful photograph, right? It's packed with all these complex colors, light, shadows. That's the world of pixels. Then on the right, you have these super clean, sharp logos. See those defined edges? That's the world of paths talking.
So this first world is called raster. You might also hear it called a bitmap image. Basically, it's just a grid, a giant grid of tiny colored squares called pixels. Think of it like a really, really detailed mosaic. Millions of tiny little colored tiles all put together to create one big picture. And hey, that camera on your phone, it's a raster image factory.
And then you have the second world, vector. Now this is totally different. Instead of a grid of pixels, a vector image is built from math, from formulas. The file isn't storing millions of colored squares. Nope. It's storing instructions like, hey, computer, draw a line from this point to that point, make it red, and make it this thick. So it's not a mosaic. It's more like a super precise blueprint.
Okay, so here's the most important part, how they behave. Raster images are resolution dependent. That's a fancy way of saying they have a fixed number of pixels, and that's all you get. But vector images, they're resolution independent. And this one difference changes everything, from the file size to what you'd use them for. That's why raster is perfect for photos, and vector absolutely rocks for logos and icons.
Now, all this talk is fine and dandy, but the real magic trick, the aha moment that truly shows you the difference between these two worlds, well, that only happens when you try to zoom in. And there it is. This is the big weakness of raster images. See, when you try to make it bigger, you're not adding detail. You're just making each of those little pixel squares bigger. The computer has no new information to work with, so it just stretches out the mosaic tiles, and bam! You get that blurry, blocky, pixelated mess we were talking about earlier.
But now, look at this. This is the vector graphic. Because it's all based on a math formula, scaling it up is no problem at all. The computer just reruns the numbers for the new, bigger size. That instruction to draw a line from A to B, it works perfectly whether that line is tiny or takes up the whole screen. You get a perfectly crisp, clean edge every single time. It's kind of amazing.
Okay, so now that we get the big idea, let's get a little more practical. Because each of these worlds has its own set of rules, its own special languages, which are just file formats really, and its own way of handling all that data.
One of the key things to understand here is compression. I mean, we need it to keep file sizes from getting out of control. There are two main types. First, there's lossy compression. Think of JPEGs. It makes files way smaller by cleverly and permanently throwing away some data your eye probably won't miss. Then there's lossless compression, which is what PNG files use. It's smarter. It finds clever ways to shrink the file size without losing a single pixel of the original information.
So this all leads us to the file formats you see every day. A JPEG? That's the king of photos, using that lossy compression to handle all that complexity. A PNG? That's your best friend for web graphics, especially if you need a transparent background, because its lossless compression keeps everything super sharp. GIF is still around for those simple, fun animations, and for vectors on the web, the champion is SVG, which stands for Scalable Vector Graphics. It's what keeps logos and icons looking perfect on any screen, no matter the size. All right, we know the what and the why, so now let's get into the how. Because to actually create and edit images in these two different worlds, you're going to need two very different kinds of tools.
And really, the two biggest names in the game are Adobe Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator. Think of Photoshop as the ultimate raster editor. It's a master of pushing pixels around, which makes it perfect for editing photos or digital painting, basically anything to do with those mosaic-style images. Illustrator, on the other hand, is the master of vectors. It's all about creating and tweaking those mathematical paths, which is exactly why it's the absolute go-to for designing logos and illustrations.
And here you can see what the workshops for each of these worlds look like. On the left, that's Photoshop. You can see tools like paintbrushes and erasers, all designed to work directly with pixels. And on the right, that's Illustrator. The star of the show there is the pen tool, which lets you create those super precise, endlessly scalable paths. They really are different tools for very different jobs.
But you know what's really cool? When these two worlds don't compete, but collaborate. Let's imagine a real-world project, like creating the branding for a new coffee shop. First, you jump into Photoshop, your raster tool, to edit some beautiful, moody photos of the coffee and the cafe itself. Then, you'd pop over to Illustrator, your vector tool, to design a clean, sharp logo that'll look great anywhere. And then, for the grand finale, you bring them together. You take that crisp vector logo and place it right on top of those rich raster photos for things like menus, website banners, or Instagram posts. And what you get is the absolute best of both worlds. You have the rich detail and atmosphere from the raster photos, combined with the clean, professional, and infinitely scalable branding from the vector logo. It just works.
So let's bring it all together. We've taken a trip through the world of pixels and the world of paths. And the biggest takeaway should be this: neither one is better than the other. They're just different tools, built for completely different jobs.
At the end of the day, it really all comes down to this one idea. The real skill is just knowing which world, which tool, and which format to use for any given job. You've got a complex, detailed photograph, you're in the raster world. You need a logo that has to look perfect on a tiny business card and a giant billboard. That is a job for Vector, no question. It's all about picking the right tool for the task and finding that perfect balance.
And that leaves us with one final thought to take with you. The next time you're scrolling through a website or using your favorite app, I want you to look a little closer. Try to spot the two worlds working together in harmony. See the crisp vector icons and text layered on top of a detailed raster background photo. And just think, how do they all combine to create these seamless, beautiful digital experiences we take for granted every single day? Thanks for joining me on this explainer.